Hello and welcome to the very first production line. Three great conversations for you. If you're looking for themes, I'd say it's about great UK innovation and manufacturing, displaying it in style, and wondering how on earth we're going to get people to notice it. We're going to be hearing about a study into perceptions of manufacturing among the British public and among young people and women in particular, and about Smart Manufacturing and Engineering Week 2024 at the NEC. But first, the government's unveiled an industry-led semiconductor institute to accelerate the development of the UK semiconductor sector, into which overall is channeling £1 billion. What semiconductor sector, you may be wondering? Well, we got one. And one of the key players the government spotlighted when it announced the institute is Pragmatic, which has received £60 million of funding from the UK Infrastructure Bank, and which has got very, very big plans indeed. I discussed them with Shane Geary, Senior Vice President of Manufacturing and Operations. Shane Geary. Now, Pragmatic is a rising star in the UK semiconductor industry, but you don't make semiconductors the way most people think of them, silicon chips. It's not that, is it? Tell us what you do.
Well, we have a unique approach to semiconductor manufacturing. We don't use silicon. Over my shoulder here, you should be able to see a 300 millimeter wafer, but it's a glass wafer. So our unique approach to semiconductor manufacturing is to use a 300 millimeter glass wafer and to coat it with a very, very thin polymer coating. And on that, we deposit our semiconductor material, and we go through some very familiar semiconductor processing steps to form our ICs. But some of the real magic that happens after we're finished the wafer manufacturing, and we essentially peel off that very thin polymer coating. And if I show here, we're left with a very thin foil of our flexible ICs, thinner than paper thin. And we mount that securely on a wafer frame and send that to customers. So, very different than silicon. It is semiconductors, it is integrated circuits, but on very, very thin, very, very flexible, and very, very low-cost manufacturing process.
So that means that obviously bendy. You can put it on anything that any material you like, really, can carry its own integrated circuit and all the information you want to put on there.
Well, that's exactly it. So any of your audience, if they're presented with the unique advantages of very thin, very flexible, very low cost, they'll immediately come up with a huge variety of potential applications. Our vision is to put our integrated circuits in 1 trillion items over the next decade. And
do you mean that? Do you mean that? 1 trillion?
That is genuinely our ambition. And when they're really low cost and very environmentally sustainable and flexible, so you can add these flexible ICs to smart packaging of devices. So, for example, to enable a flexible and circular economy, to enable recycling of goods, of packaging, adding some of these really, really low-cost ICs enables all that. So that then rapidly gets us up into the tens, hundreds of billions and into the trillions of items over the next decade or so.
Can we identify what you mean by low cost? I mean, I'm assuming that what you mean is something that's almost negligible when you compare with the price of, say, a bottle or a cardboard box or an item.
And that's exactly it. And not so much the unit cost of that bottle itself, but its entire life cycle cost, and enabling the added value of true recycling. I think in the context of that overall cost and overall value, absolutely, the return on investment of integrating something like a Flex IC into pretty low cost devices and objects is absolutely something that some of our customers are really, really excited about. And I think this can only be done with the very low cost technology we have, and we talk about we can build wafer fabrication lines at a tiny fraction of the cost of an advanced silicon wafer fab. And that then, at really high levels of productivity and really optimized manufacturing process, allows us to make ICs, flexible ICs, at very low cost.
Now, anybody who's you're running a factory, a warehouse, or whatever will be familiar with RFIDs. Does this replace the RFID which people put on stock parts, on bins, and so on?
Well, indeed, it enables RFID, because one of the key applications of our flexible ICs, if you bond this to an antenna, if you design an RFID chip using our flexible IC technology and bond it to an antenna, now you have a very low cost RFID tag that's flexible, and I think really will help enable RFID and NFC use cases in a much broader set of use cases than currently. So I think it's very much part of enabling RFID market to grow in the long term.
Now, obviously, as the net zero legislation, the regulations, the obligations on the part of an increasing number of manufacturers, all the way to small manufacturers eventually, is going to mean that people have got to be aware of scope 1 and 2 is fair enough, but scope 3 emissions, every identifiable part of their supply chain, they're going to have to report the carbon element of what they do. I'm assuming that this plays right into assisting that.
Well, it absolutely does, and also a term that's beginning to grow in usage is scope 4, which is replacing downstream applications and devices with something which is much cleaner. So I think what if we allow our flex ICs to replace silicon ICs, that's another source of saving in the world that some people are calling scope 4. But so we have a very, very compelling sustainability message. And I'll start with scope 1 and scope 2. We have a manufacturing process that is extremely optimized and efficient. And we have absolutely stripped that process down to the minimum number of steps that delivers the maximum value. And so, we can add that together with the fact that our ICs are very thin and flexible. That says we're using very little material. And we don't have some of the long, high temperature process steps that you have in silicon. We use a fraction of the gases and liquids and water and chemicals. We have, per IC or per square inch of silicon, in silicon case or the flex ICs in our case, we use a small fraction of the energy, small fraction of the water. So as a sustainable manufacturing enterprise, we are orders of magnitude more efficient than a silicon fab, which just has to consume so much energy and so much water and so much toxic gases and chemicals. And our process is just so fundamentally more sustainable.
Before we get further into that, just a quick question, because you talked about maybe your flex ICs beginning to replace applications where currently silicon chips are being used. We haven't mentioned the power potential, the computing power potential of flex ICs. We've kind of assumed they're pretty basic, but what's the potential in there for future usage?
Yeah, so I don't think our big advantage here is necessarily replacing silicon like for like, by the way. So when we're talking about getting into 1 trillion devices over the next, or 1 trillion objects over the next decade, that really was never going to be where silicon was going to play anyway. So it's really the adjacent and new markets and new application areas that's where we really think we're enabling. But the surprising amount of compute capability possible in our flex ICs, even though geometries are larger than leading edge silicon. We published a Nature paper where we have a 32-bit ARM processor implemented in an older generation of the flex IC process, and we just published another Nature paper where we've implemented a machine learning algorithm on a very, very small, low power circuit core on Flex ICs. So very, very widespread applications. And in fact, one of our key strategies here is to make our process available to the outside world, like a foundry, make our PDK, our process design kit, available to customers for them to innovate and design onto our Flex IC process. And then you've innumerable examples of what could be achieved using our customers' innovative IC design capabilities once we make these processes available to customers.
One of the developments that's being managed by the High Value Manufacturing Catapult and by the Advanced Manufacturing Research Center, AMRC in particular, is to develop what they call the digital thread, which means that data, non-proprietary data, but data can follow a product from the design process, entire life cycle, all the way through to disassembly across the entire range of manufacturing. I imagine that the Flex IC could marry into that intention, that paradigm very easily.
Well, I think that's exactly the use case we're talking about, because you want to have a really flexible form factor. You want it to be conform to whatever the traceability requirements of whatever materials you're talking about. You want some memory capabilities. You want some compute capabilities. You want to be able to read it, something like NFC or RFID. And that implementing that level of traceability, what we call item level intelligence, right through the manufacturing supply chain, whether it's expensive goods, whether it's fast moving consumer goods, whether it's food, whether it's pharma, this ability to implement traceability entirely through the full product life cycle. I think marries well exactly to the capabilities of our Flex ICs and the form factor that we deliver and the cost that we can deliver.
Thinking about it, you could have multiple Flex ICs inside a product. I mean, a car, for instance, multiple bits, aeroplanes. So the traceability and origin, provenance of parts has always been a problem. Blockchain has helped that, but this will really assist in identifying the origins of parts, and of course, as you've just said, tracing everything from start to finish.
That's exactly it. And there are some industries where this is a big challenge because you may ship in bulk from your manufacturing location, and then you take that bulk supply and you split into small lots, and then you distribute it to customers. So take, for example, pills being shipped from a pharma plant, and they ship in large boxes and in bulk, and they get split into small boxes and distributed to pharmacies. And so maintaining that traceability all the way through the life cycle and distribution of that product as it gets split from a large bulk supply to small individual packages, that does require this low cost smart packaging. And that is exactly the type of use cases that Flex ICs are perfect for.
I know that actually the NHS, healthcare generally, is a big play for you, isn't it? I mean, it's not just about pills. This could apply throughout the healthcare system.
Well, I think it could, and there's lots of healthcare use cases. And I give that challenge to some of your listeners about if you're presented with these really low cost, flexible, thin ICs, what could you do with them? And some of the medical applications in the future could be, for example, around smart patches that you can stick on your body that need to be flexible, need to be able to conform to your skin, need to have some memory, need to have some compute, need to have some sensing. That is a perfect application for Flex ICs. So many medical applications, quite beyond the traceability of pills and medicines.
You talked about working with customers on their projected use cases, asking them to come up with ways in which this could be used. But you also have your fab in a box as a service. Tell us a little bit about that, because I thought fabs were pretty, You couldn't move them around. They're sealed units, clean rooms, the whole thing. You're talking about doing all this in a box that can be moved.
Yeah, so it's a very, very small clean room area. We like to say that, the minimum viable silicon fab is likely thousands, man, tens of thousands of square meters of clean room space. And a very, very large construction project costing many, many billions of dollars. Our capital expenditures are 1/100th of that scale. Our size of our clean rooms is less than a tenth of that size. So our minimum viable wafer fab, a mini fab, is only a few hundred square meters and can be put into essentially a brownfield site, a warehouse, or beside some of our integrated into our customers' manufacturing sites. Doesn't need the massive amounts of power, water, natural gas, etc., that needs to be supplied to a major silicon fab. So we can essentially put this fab in a box in any medium-sized warehouse that has a few hundred square meters of empty space, and takes very little construction. So that is a unique ability that we have, and it really because of our very, very simplified process, which, as I mentioned, very high productivity, very high throughput per square meter of clean room, very low levels of material usage. So we can manufacture a lot of ICs, a lot of output from very little inputs. And that's what allows us is to put this small fab in a box in essentially any location where there may be an existing brownfield site, existing manufacturing site, or an empty warehouse.
You're really upending the semiconductor industry. How many other companies are there out there globally doing what you're doing?
We would say none. I don't think there's any company that has the combination of the technologies, the flexible ICs made in the type of way that we do it at the low cost and the sustainability levels that we have, and that can package this up into a fab in a box and run a distributed manufacturing model. I think we do leverage the broader semiconductor industry very much so. I mean, we use relatively standard clean room equipment, so it's about repurposing standard semiconductor manufacturing equipment towards a very, very unique process. So the mini fabs that we build are very recognizable to anyone in the semiconductor industry. They recognize the tools, they recognize the process steps. But the unique bit is the materials and the process flow that we use. And we think that combination is truly unique in the industry.
Clearly, there are going to be people who are going to ask the question, we saw what happened to ARM, we saw what happened to Newport Fab. Newport Fab, it got a bit mixed up because the government had to step in and stop one element of the buyout, and eventually went to an American bidder. ARM is no longer British. What about Pragmatic? I know you've had £60 million of investment from the UK Infrastructure Bank, which means that the government, the nation, has gotten behind you. Can we hope that Pragmatic will stay in the UK as a UK company?
So we're very, very proud of our UK heritage. And we've got the first 300 millimeter semiconductor manufacturing plant in the UK. We've invested very heavily in the UK, and we have the majority UK investors. We have a very, very aggressive investment plan for the UK to expand our 300 millimeter manufacturing line in the Northeast over the next several years. So we're very committed to the UK. We're very proud of our UK heritage, and don't see that changing. And, we see ourselves as a UK and UK-based company.
Well, Shane Geary, good luck to you. Thank you very much for being on the production line.
Great to talk to you, Nick.
A trillion objects and devices, it makes the head spin. The Pragmatic story is typical of what evangelists for manufacturing want to get across to young people who are not flocking to careers in manufacturing and engineering in anything like the numbers the sector needs. The fact is, for that to happen, perceptions of the sector need to change. A new survey by the University of Strathclyde on behalf of Interact did a deep dive into what the public thinks about manufacturing and came up with findings that are in part troubling and, quite surprisingly perhaps, really quite positive. The research was led by Dr. Rob Stewart. Dr. Rob Stewart, a very warm welcome to the production line. If I can perhaps summarize your report into the perceptions of manufacturing, it is that people love it, but they wouldn't want to work there. Is that a fair conclusion to draw?
I mean, I suppose yes and no. People do value and they place high value on manufacturing as a sector for things like innovation and local jobs. And one of the messages in our survey was very simply just keep up talking the value of the sector, because that's important. It seems to go across age groups, social classes, gender, whatever you like. That value that people attach to manufacturing is fairly persistent. Does that translate into the kind of the world of jobs? Probably not, because people have different perceptions in there. One of the interesting issues that we wanted to explore was the kind of associations and stereotypes that kind of people have, and the images that people have of manufacturing jobs. And despite the smart, squeaky, clean worlds of advanced manufacturing and smart manufacturing, the world of, if you like, emerging technologies, old industry images dominate perception for working in the sector. And to be quite frank, they're not that attractive for a lot of people.
Well, that's a very familiar tale, and I'm wondering if we can just put a bit of context into this, because there have been similar studies in the UK before, but not that often. One of the main ones, the Livesey study, was, I think, back in 2012. Make UK has also been doing this, but in the United States, they ascribe a bit more importance to understanding the perceptions of manufacturing, I believe. Looking at what they come up with, do you think there's any read across from the American experience to the British UK experience?
That's an interesting topic, Nick. And one of the the inspirations for our survey was providing a modern update on kind of the UK. You'll find plenty of material in the UK that talks up the value of the sector. That's good. But in the kind of the research base and the literature is fairly strong on that side. But it's in the UK, as you said, is kind of weaker in terms of looking at manufacturing as in terms of job quality as a career choice, and kind of critically how that may change with digitalization and and emerging technologies.
I find this whole thing, there's a real paradox here, because in the United States, home of Silicon Valley and all of that technology, there is still the perception of the dark satanic mills, or their equivalent thereof. Pardon me. But the other paradox is that where the smart technology future does cut through, it also creates uncertainty, because people say, well, all this AI and automation, robotics is great, but what's the point of going to work in manufacturing if a piece of tech is going to kill my job? People do believe that, and in some cases it may even be true, certainly at the lower end, but they don't believe that there is a higher value career to be had in that smarter technology future.
I think all of that is very, very fair comment, particularly over the last 2 years, but particularly the last year. There's been a huge media splurge on the implications of increasing automation, digitalization, and kind of some of the scary bits around kind of what generative AI will do. History, of course, shows us that in any technological change and revolution, that it really is about it's about augmenting jobs, tasks, and skills. Do jobs go? Of course they go. Otherwise, we would still have people wandering the streets trying to put out, imaginary gas lamps that are not there. But it's absolutely clear that the whole history of work is the elimination of the dull, the dirty, the dangerous, the repetitive on the job sites. But they are often replaced by other things because technological revolution is about job creation. I know that. Other people might know that. But that doesn't translate through to a wider populace and public who, as you saw in our survey, very, very divided about job creation and job destruction. And we very, very deliberately pitched in kind of that question in that kind of way. Delighted it showed it. But yeah, it does kind of highlight the kind of the dangers that people think comes with technology. And I think manufacturing is one of those industries that's particularly vulnerable to it. And the survey itself, we kind of picked up kind of bits and threads of that concern, but kind of not in any big way. And I thought the more interesting point in the material we did on job creation versus job destruction was when you looked at what it meant for different groups, it was extremely positive for kind of Gen Z, and kind of that's kind of what you would expect because they are the first digitally native generation, and they in a sense, are just as positive in the context of technology as also manufacturing workers are, which gives a different slice and on view on the concerns of others, because the people in the first half, the people closest to the sector are not as concerned about it, and the people who you want to bring into this sector aren't as bothered about it as you might think. And that and those kind of twin messages, very good and very positive.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it, that the digital tech message, a lot of young people automatically think there are job opportunities to be had in maybe fintech or gaming. It's the fact that equal numbers and values of jobs, valued jobs, are available in manufacturing, and it's good to hear that progress is being made on that. I want to just move to because this is all about perception and reality, but perception is there is often a difference. It's about the job, the value of a manufacturing job, and the criteria by which it's judged. I found it fascinating that there's a marked difference in attitudes between genders, and also a clear suggestion that manufacturers should perhaps think of upping their people game, that people practices and policies are not necessarily fit for what a future workforce is looking for. Tell us a bit more about that.
We hear a lot about women in manufacturing, as we do a lot about Gen Z, but women in particular, I think, are a very distinct group. The manufacturers and kind of trade association have been wanting to bring in over the years, and while that kind of, in objective terms, the workforce is growing, it's a slow burn or a slow upload. They are simply less familiar with the world of manufacturing and jobs. And when you ask them, as we did in our survey about manufacturing jobs and what they thought of the sector, they tend to think of it as manual, which is a kind of proxy for male-dominated, but mainly manual, in a way that other groups think of manufacturing as maybe more technical or more creative. So I think there's a job to be done there, with that particular group. Our view is that more people practices in manufacturing will make a big difference in the sector. They will make it more attractive for groups like women to come in. And on the flip side of that, not just to come in, but actually stay in the sector and thrive in the sector, which is really what you want. And you don't do that. You can't do that without kind of good people practices.
Yeah, because so much of the skill shortage that is, frankly, a bit scary for many in manufacturing, could be resolved by resolving the gender imbalance. I'll never forget a great story told by a degree apprentice engineer at Rolls-Royce, a very, very talented young woman who said, "I will know that we're getting things right when there's a queue for the ladies' loo at Rolls-Royce."
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and it's a very, very simple example. I think of kind of. I suppose the kind of the fancy academic term for people like me who sit in ivory towers, but the fancy academic term would be inclusive workspaces. I think manufacturers, individual employers and groups of employers really have to get out there and, kind of start talking to people, particularly the groups that they want to attract.
We'll get onto that in just a second, but there's one point I want to explore, which is around the encouragement thing. Now, people talk about needing parents in particular, and maybe grandparents too, to encourage young people into a career in manufacturing and engineering, a technical career, whatever that might look like. And I think what your survey suggests is that there's the old-fashioned attitudes towards manufacturing mean that there's quite a bit of negativity being transmitted, which is holding people back. And I think that, obviously we've just discussed, getting more young women into the sector, but trying to change that mindset is an absolute critical importance, really, because otherwise, how are young people to be told about a career in manufacturing?
Again, lots of agreement on kind of my side. Let me give you a very simple example, and it's the level of schools. I have two daughters. About 5, 6, 7 years ago, you got for the careers night, and it was a very straight divide between boys going into construction and girls going into kind of fashion and beauty. I personally gobsmacked that anyone from a skills agency got up and kind of articulated that kind of view. My two kids went into STEM areas, brilliant. You ask them about engineering and whether they kind of like to go down that route and pathway. You ask them about manufacturing, you ask them about digital stuff, and kind of you get this kind of blank look on the face, which is, what is that, Dad? And I think that's what they're trying to encourage the boys to do. And it's a very basic level. That's what you're dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that there isn't a formalized careers advisory service, that it's all done by teachers who themselves may be carrying those negative old perceptions from their past, doesn't help. And this isn't a political program, but if I was advising anybody or trying to lobby anybody, I say bring back a careers advisory service that was professional, that was able to cut through those misperceptions. Final point, Rob. We've talked a lot about messaging and wanting to get the message out, and your report indeed does conclude that manufacturers need to be, out and proud and loud, and talking to as many people as possible. a lot of manufacturers would say to you, man, we're already doing this. We're already doing this. We're going into schools. We're talking to parents groups. We're opening our factories. We're doing this, that, and the other, and it's still not cutting through. I don't know if you've got any conclusion to draw from that, or whether there's more that we should be doing. Did your study address that, how to get the message across?
I mean, I think my general point would be, if you're an employer, if you're a trade body, and you're doing all these things, keep doing it. Just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. One of the issues in our study that came up was the media visibility of manufacturing. Okay, you can put a program about the factory on kind of national TV, and you can try and get people to watch it. But only about a third of our example, third of our sample could tell us that they'd seen something positive about manufacturing, say, over the past year. So the visibility is an issue. Visibility is a problem. You've not just got to shout about it. You've got to shout about it in a particular way that gets you noticed. So much more engagement. If your target audience is kind of Gen Z, you're on social media. If it's a general thing, I heard a really nice story, a workshop I was at about a manufacturer in Germany who was looking to up the profile of their kind of sector and kind of business, and they simply took some of the kit outside of their factory and their workplace, and they pitched it in a shopping centre. Right? So they pitched it in a shopping centre, and they got all these kids who were passing with their, kind of their parents, and it's that direct engagement with people, the kind of the face-to-face stuff, the chatting away with people. That's the stuff that ends up, kind of making a wee bit of a difference. The older industrial legacy will kind of always be there because of what the UK is and what it's done. But slowly over time, you've got to be in a position where you're moving the dial on some of that images and towards the smarter stuff, towards the tech, and maybe no better way of introducing people to some of the tech and, kind of how fun it is to be in there by just taking it out to people and showing it.
Well, that is a fantastic story. Rob Stewart, thank you very much indeed. A great study. We'll put a link to where people can get hold of the study. It's really well worth a read. Thank you very much indeed for being on the production line.
Thank you, Nick.
Not sure we'll be seeing a 5-axis CNC milling machine outside Tesco any day soon, but who knows. On the subject of skills and recruitment, they say that if you get more than a couple of manufacturers in a room, within a few minutes they'll start sharing horror stories about the lack of skilled recruits available. Well, there are going to be many, many more than a couple of manufacturers at the Smart Manufacturing and Engineering Week at the NEC on June the 5th and 6th. And yes, I know, there may be a very good chance that you're watching this or listening to it after the event. But do persevere, because my conversation with Henry Anson of the manufacturer, which organized the show, covered a great deal more ground than just what was on display, because the issue of skills is something he and the team really engaged with. Henry Anson, a very warm welcome to the production line. Just a few days to go now before Smart Manufacturing and Engineering Week gets underway. Must be a real sense of excitement in the office.
Yes, Nick, you're absolutely right. And thank you for the opportunity to have a chat with you. Huge sense of excitement, large degrees of trepidation, lots to do, but we're all moving in the right direction and really looking forward to the industry gathering next week.
It's always been a fantastic event, whether back in the day it was in Liverpool, now it's at the NEC in Birmingham. As you say, a palpable sense of excitement, friends coming together, supporting the industry. What can visitors expect in particular this time? Have you got any sort of greatest hits you want to parade?
So we very much themed it as around a festival. There's a festival theme. We want this exhibition to be fun. as well as informative, and the opportunity to network with people and learn new things. We've got 455 exhibitors, which is more than we've ever had before. We've got 150 presentations going on. We've got 3 summits and all sorts of STEM-related activity running throughout the course of the 2 days. So there's an enormous amount of activity happening at the show, which can cater for everyone's information requirements.
Is there anything about the makeup of the show, about the kind of exhibitors you're attracting, about some of the talks that are being given, that give you a sense of the sector's current priorities?
Yeah, there's a very wide range of exhibitors and presentations. I mean, the one thing that's become totally apparent to us over the course of the last 12 months or so is that AI is very much at the top of people's agenda at the moment. And a lot of the conversations and the presentations and the debate in the summits will be around AI, its uses in manufacturing. It appears to us that most manufacturers are now on a journey, and just seeing where it'll take them. But AI, I suspect, is probably be one of the major talking points over the course of the show.
It tends to dominate just about everything in life these days, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
But it's going to be really interesting to see the extent to which, it's already been present in the manufacturing sector, AI, not necessarily the sort of the chat GPT type, which is making all the headlines, but artificial intelligence in terms of predictive maintenance and all that. It's been around for quite a while now. But as you say, fascinating to see how manufacturers get to grips with it and what kind of messaging they're going to hear from some of the excellent companies who are going to be making those presentations.
Yeah, no, I totally and utterly agree. I mean, I think everyone's feeling their way slightly at the moment, but there's an understanding that it is part of the future of the sector.
It's been a tough few years for the sector, really, hasn't it? I mean, the economy generally was sideswiped by COVID, but so many things with extended and fractured supply chains, energy prices, etc., etc. Manufacturers have taken quite a hit. I'm wondering if you feel that has been reflected in the way that this exhibition has been going over the last 3 years of its existence.
Yeah, Nick, you're absolutely right. I mean, manufacturing has had a really tough 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Probably starting with Brexit, through to all the global crisis, Ukraine, the problems in the Suez and things. I have detected this year a palpable sense of excitement and energy in the sector that I hadn't felt for about 10 years. I think manufacturing in this country is on the rebound. I think the investment intentions from most of the manufacturers that we were speaking to, which had been slightly put on hold over the last 2 or 3 years, we're now beginning to see them realize. So I am, me, Nick, my cup is always half full when it comes to this sector, but my cup is very full at the moment. I think manufacturing is in a really good place. Now, it can be derailed. It's a very fragile global situation at the moment, and something could happen very quickly. But at this precise moment in time, I'm feeling a degree of optimism, and I'm hearing a degree of optimism that I haven't heard since pre-Brexit.
I want to talk about the future and that sense of positivity in the sector in a minute, because it's election year, and some people are saying that the political landscape will have a significant impact on the future of the sector. But first, I want to talk about a study that Dr. Rob Stewart at Strathclyde University did for Interact. He was talking to young people about perceptions of manufacturing. Now, these are Gen Z, young women, and indeed young workers in the sector. And I'm just going to take a second just to give you a very quick oversight of them, Henry, because I think this really matters. It says the digital future looks bright, but there are concerns about downskilling and job destruction. Attracting future talent means more good people practice. Images of manufacturing work are putting people off, and so on and so forth. And the advice for the sector is, for goodness sake, big yourselves up more and try to present a much stronger vision of manufacturing as a place to work in the future. Now then, Smart Manufacturing and Engineering Week Do you address any of those issues around perception and young people and getting them excited about working in the sector?
Very much so. I wouldn't want to disagree with someone like Rob, but again, I feel, and I'm feeling just the faintest twinges that the public perception about manufacturing is changing. The MTA, as you know, produced their excellent report, which was coincided with the launch of Mac a month or so ago, where they really tried to dig into the true impact of manufacturing in the UK sector, and that got BBC News coverage. Now, I absolutely understand that the biggest long-term threat to manufacturing is the lack of young people coming into the sector and the diversity of those people coming into the sector. But again, I just feel just the faintest or green shoots of change, and that people are beginning to understand quite how important manufacturing is to the UK economy, and that kids are beginning to realise that it's not that dirty drudge job, that people, repetitive jobs that we're stereotyped with. I mean, you and I have been around, factories like McLaren and things where you could genuinely eat your breakfast off the floor there. I mean, there's nothing dirty or repetitive there. It's a world-class operation. In terms of what we're doing next week, we've got a very, very packed STEM program. And it includes Richard Noble's latest venture, Thrust, WSH, which is an attempt to break the world water speed record. And also, we're massively promoting his engagement with young people. So we'll be doing that at the show. We've got the World Skills Challenge going on, which is a competition for young people, sponsored by FANUC. And we have a dedicated STEM afternoon on Thursday afternoon. And what we've done actually is encourage our exhibitors to get rid of the old folk, like you and I, I'm afraid, Nick, and staff their stands on that afternoon with their apprentices, and greater levels of diversity, in order to engage with these young people who are coming around, rather than talking to people such as yourselves and myself.
I'll take that on the chin, Henry. No worries. Okay, now you and I, obviously, as you said, we've been around the block, and talking about perception and the fact that manufacturing is being talked about. I think it's the first time for years that it's been on the political radar to such an extent. Obviously, the big E in the room is not an elephant. It's the election on July the 4th. If the polls are correct and Labour wins, do you think we'll see a sea change in the way that government relates to industry? And is that something, perhaps there's this sort of pent-up desire for change inside manufacturing itself, which could lead to fantastic second half of the year and 2025?
Yeah, I think both of the main political parties have now realised and come to terms with the fact that manufacturing is an absolutely critical part of the UK's future. And I'm just very much hoping that if there is a change of government, the Tory government's autumn 4.5 billion tax relief will be carried through. I can't think that it won't be, but I'm not a politician and I don't know. I genuinely do think that both political parties now understand the importance of manufacturing, and I'm hoping that will continue regardless of whichever government's in charge in a month's time.
Yeah, because you mentioned a few minutes ago that you're sensing that more manufacturers are beginning to invest again. The investment cycle's picking up, and the reason, well, one of the major reasons it's been a little bit subdued for the last few years is the lack of certainty around industrial policy. We had an industrial strategy in 2017, lasted a couple of years, then bingo, got thrown out the window. So the fact that there may now be a period of stability will, fingers crossed, encourage manufacturers to say, well, you know what, I can start to invest. And these are 10-year ROI cycles, aren't they? They're not the short term. This is long term. We need calm, stability, and long-term planning.
I couldn't disagree with a single word you just said. That is exactly what this sector needs. Exactly.
Okay, final point, Henry. You were just on this perception issue. This is perhaps a slightly downbeat note to end our conversation, but it is that people talk about this perception issue, about the need to get the message out. You say that the messaging is happening all over the place, but Rob Stewart's survey is correct. Still a lot of work to do. I wonder what needs to happen, because it seems that manufacturers all say we've got to get out there and shout about it, and yet everybody's so very busy fighting the daily fight.
Yeah, and I do think manufacturers have got to look to themselves here a bit as well. You can't expect government to provide all or many of the answers. The associations, they've got to be more open about engagement in their local areas. And, rather than do it on an individual basis, I would encourage the manufacturers out there listening to this to engage with the National Manufacturing Day that's in September and promoted by Make UK. If enough of you open your doors and gates on a certain set day, the national media will pick it up. We probably get a politician to launch it and everything like that. So it's initiatives like that. What I think the sector's struggled with for many, many years is lots of small, very well-meaning initiatives that are not in any way coordinated. And I think we need to get together as a sector and make National Manufacturing Day, for instance, the big let's attract young people into the sector day. Let's accept that together we're much stronger than we are if we do it in isolated little bits and pieces.
Well, Henry, that, as ever, words from the wise. I hope you have a fantastic time, you and the team, and everybody who's going to be at Smart Manufacturing and Engineering Week at the NEC next week. And thank you for being on the production line.
Nick, absolutely delighted, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Henry Anson of The Manufacturer. As I said, you may be listening to this after Smart Manufacturing and Engineering Week, but look on the bright side. That means the next edition of The Production Line is only just around the corner. We'll see you then. The Production Line is produced by Manufacturing TV. If you'd like to suggest a story for The Production Line, maybe you'd like to be on it, or perhaps your company would like to sponsor the program, email info@ukmfgmedia.com, info@ukmfgmedia.com, or go to our website ukmfg.tv.